Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining another Skills-Based Health on-demand video brought to you by DESE, Missouri Healthy Schools, and MOSHAPE. Today, we are jumping into instructional strategy, journaling, and drawing. And my name's Brad Rummel. I'm the Health and PE Coordinator for Springfield Public Schools. I'm joined by Kim Goforth. Hi, Kim.
Hello, Brad. How are you today?
I'm doing excellent. I'm feeling good because I'm with you and we are talking health ed. So
Same here.
we are hoping to accomplish one major learning objective today for the viewer. We hope that at the end that you will be able to plan a learning activity that uses journaling and or drawing for student practice of health skills. We know the importance of health skills, but as a teacher, the more tools that you have in your toolbox to help that happen, we know that the more successful you will be. So today we have created a training guide to help you with learning this new instructional strategy. And you can access it by clicking the link in the description of the YouTube video. You can download it. You can use the fillable PDF boxes, or you can print it and write on it, whichever way you prefer to learn.
All right. Ready to get started?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. Let's talk a little bit about why and the power that you could have using journaling and drawing for your students to master health skills. One big why is that it allows students to reflect, whether their past experience or the experiences that they currently are engaged in, and apply some new understandings. And so kind of the thinking of write it out, get it out of your brain and get it onto some paper. Also provides students an opportunity to keep track of their experiences related to health skills. And so if you, as the teacher, can kind of fine tune what you're having them journal or draw about, can very much enhance their experience and connections to health skills. Also gives them an opportunity who aren't very vocal in your class. The ones that you may not hear a lot from, they're not the kid in front that raises their hand for everything, or maybe you have some blurters that they want to talk in class, and you think, okay, they're getting it, they're engaging in the conversation. You may have some quiet ones that need a space to communicate their thoughts, and so this gives them that opportunity to communicate their thoughts. Another thing, it develops metacognition around some of these health skills and how they are going to apply it. And so it takes it very here. It takes it very in their head, and they can have that thought process to carry that into their young adult lives. And then it establishes a lifelong coping strategy or skill. And I have to tell you, Brad, this is one that I continue to use. I didn't have experience using a health journal when I was in high school because I'm old and we didn't do that kind of thing. But I definitely journal now. I doodle, I draw a lot, especially around this standard that we're going to talk about here in a little bit about goal setting. I have different colored Sharpies and pens that I like to keep organized with. So this one speaks very true to me. And so as an educator, I kind of took that into my classroom when I was trying to give students strategies. And so I've also talked with several teachers, and then RMC Health, when we went through this particular training, they shared some quotes from teachers about the power of using journals in the health classroom. And so some of them kind of just, jumped out at me. And so these were some quotes from teachers that were in practice using journaling or drawing in their classroom. And some of these just really struck my heart a little bit. And it helps kids, that first one, making some of those connections to not just the curriculum, but to the world around them. And I think that through journaling, they can start to draw and sketch some of those connections and start some webbing or mapping. The middle one talks a little bit about reflecting on their own thinking process. And so sometimes our brains get working so fast, we miss parts of it. But if you can just jot down some words as your brain is taking over and is kind of busy, it can really look at, boy, I was really thinking all of that in that 5 seconds. Yes, kind of a brain dump. And then the last one, I think is huge for our secondary kids, that they have to have a place where they're not going to feel judged. And I think some of those quiet kids that in the classroom have things to say, but they don't respond out of fear of that judgment piece. Well, those peers over there they don't live their life like I do, and so I'm going to keep my mouth shut. This provides them an opportunity to get it out and not be judged by that. And so I think these are just some interesting quotes by teachers that are in the trenches using this particular strategy. So it really speaks to the why, on why this is a powerful strategy.
And Kim, I would reflect on my past experiences with teaching elementary PE. And one big change for me when moving into the health education realm and visiting classrooms is that the pace is very different. So like in an elementary lesson for 30 minutes, like the pace was very fast. You wanted to maximize every minute. There was an instant activity when kids came in the door. And that pace is different in a health education setting. But I think that the urgency is still the same in wanting to take advantage of every instructional minute that we are blessed with our students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think journaling is a great opportunity, kind of like an instant activity when students are entering. If you get busy as an educator, if you're putting out a fire from the last class, or if you're building a relationship with a student as they come in because you can see that they're having a bad day,
mm-hmm.
a journaling prompt, a journaling routine allows students to start learning as soon as they enter your classroom,
right,
rather than having to wait for you as the educator, because we know we're going to get sidetracked and we know we're going to get multitasking. And I think that one of my favorite things as an instant activity as an elementary PE teacher was that students could start the learning and practice opportunities before I was ready. And I think journaling gives you that as a health educator as well. They can start a journal process and a reflection process without me as the sage on the stage directing traffic.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
So some other tips and tricks that we would like to share about journaling and drawing is that you want to make sure that you utilize prompts. And we do have a instructional strategy video specifically related to prompts. And so we would encourage you to check out that to find out more details on best practices with prompts. But we want to make sure that that prompt is helping students reflect on the health skill and that's relevant and that they can apply it to their own life. Structures and routines are huge. That's probably going to determine whether or not you're successful with journaling. Do you have a safe place to keep the journals? Is it a regular part of your routine? Maybe you're teaching health and PE and your classroom and instructional space is the gymnasium. And so you've got to think through that. Do the students have a safe place to write? You definitely want to communicate confidentiality. You want to remind students that if you're a mandated reporter and you want to air all that out and have clear communication and have those rules based around confidentiality, and let students know that you will be viewing their journal if you will be. And then for students that may be pre-literate, you want to make sure that they have the option to use drawing to communicate their learning and reflection in their responses. With a dialectical journal, this is the difference between a dialectical journal and maybe a more traditional journal, is that there's going to be some back and forth between teacher and student. This is my preference. This is what I would recommend to my teachers, that there is a response after reading a student journal. So there's maybe some reflection, maybe there's a question, but the student will start by answering the prompt, writing in their journal. They could even ask questions in their journal, and then there's reflection between teacher and student. And so this allows the teacher to engage with the students and build relationships, and ultimately allows deeper understanding and reflection on that topic from the student. Mm-hmm. Kim, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I think that in a perfect world, when you're using journals, is to have a balance of a traditional safe space for the students to get some things out and the dialectical, because I think that as teachers, we want to see what they're responding to some of our prompts with, and we could offer up some formative assessment type tools, but they have to go in and read and provide feedback for students, and then also give them that space that they just kind of need to get some things out. So I think that a perfect world would be a balance of both traditional journaling and then the dialectical. So I think both are important, but the strategy that we're going to talk through together here in just a moment is more of the traditional. So just wanted to explain the difference there. They're both
And
great. Yeah.
I've seen teachers before where students have the option. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a place to turn in your journal if you want your teacher to review your journal. There's a place to turn it in if I don't want the teacher to read and give feedback on it. And it's also very time consuming. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for a health educator, if you've got 6 periods of health a day, you're probably not going to have time to read and give feedback to every student. And so I've seen teachers use like a rotational method where I'm going to respond to these 5 students
Mm-hmm.
for each class, and I'm rotating so that I'm hitting every student within 1 week.
Right.
And so you have to come up with your own system that's successful for you, but it's important that you're intentional.
Yep. Absolutely. Great practice. Yep.
So we would like you to access your training guide on page 1 and complete the opening activity. You heard the why, you heard some of the tips and tricks. Make sure you capture what you want to remember, maybe an aha moment, something that you plan to implement, and capture that thought on page 1, question 1 on your training guide. So next, we're going to model a practice opportunity using journaling and drawing, and we're going to use goal setting, standard 6, to do that. Standard 6, we have a deep dive video if you want to learn more about it, but it's basically where students are demonstrating the ability to use goal setting skills to enhance their health. And Kim is going to demonstrate a high school practice opportunity where students are assessing personal health practices and their overall health status.
Yes, I will try my best. And what's hard about picking one performance indicator for that slide was you can use journaling for every step forever. Right. So it was kind of hard. So I could have put a laundry list on there, but to save your eyes, we've just put one. So here is the teaching progression for the 9-12 grade span regarding goal setting. And so if you look, and we just think about journaling and drawing on our brains as we look at it through this lens. So step 1, monitoring behavior, and that's usually in the form of some type of health assessment. And so if you can visualize, they take this health assessment that you've created, that you've engaged these students in, and then in their journal, they reflect, wow, I'm really killing it in these areas in my health. And then, here's some things that I need to probably focus on regarding my health assessment score. So that's one space in step 1 that you could journal. And then step 2 is that space where I think we spend a lot of time as health educators talking about SMART goals. And we have these super cool, pretty worksheets that make the SMART big, and then they make sure they have every component when they write a very clear goal. And I picture that being a drawing piece, maybe in their journal, where they can draw some of the S, and they can put their frillies on it and things like that. And so what I want to model through are what I feel are the more important steps of this teaching progression, where they can get a real meaty goal based on their health assessment. And then let's make a plan and let's talk about it. And then we can't forget that last piece of reflecting. And so I want to spend some time modeling through step 3. And so if we take a look at step 3's teaching progression in the health skills skill guides that RMC Health has, it nicely lays out our sub skills. And so we've got this goal, and we have to start forward thinking about what are some of my barriers that I'm going to run into. And then, like I said in this focus area, identify the action steps that I'm going to have to take to get there. And so I think charting out my action steps speaks very nicely to the drawing component of journaling. And so I know bullet journals and mapping, kind of that mind mapping, conceptual mapping, webbing, mind webbing, those kinds of things are what I hear when I talk about action steps. And so to give students practice with this, so some of the practice opportunities, and again, using the strategy of prompts that Brad said we have a separate video on. So these are some samples. On the left, focusing on the piece of this skill that talks about what are my action steps if my overall goal is health. Now that's pretty general, but based on their health assessment, maybe it's getting more sleep, let's say. Just let them start to map, let them start to journal. This could be pictures like this one is, or it could be a very narrative, and they start out with, I need to get more sleep. But give them a place for these 2 pictures on the left talk about my steps. The two pictures on the right kind of indicate my timelining. And so I think that whether they use a webbing type drawing in their journal or a narrative, then they can take the pieces out and maybe on the second page or right there within their map, start to timeline. And you can see on this example on the right, it's more of a checklist, but it's that bullet journal idea of things. And they're very popular now. And this, I love this one because it's all colorful and it speaks to my colorful Sharpie brain. But again, I think that it helps giving kids some samples like this, that they may want to set that up, and maybe they've never used that before, but then they can plot their journey of goal achievement as they go through this using their journal. And it's very personal to them. And I think that it just outlines the action plan very nicely. And now that's the practice opportunity for step 3 only. But then again, I just think I'd be doing everyone a disservice if I didn't say another thing that needs to happen, though, is they need to reflect on that journal or on their goal. And then again, using prompts that have a place within that journal to answer some of these questions. How did my action plan play out? Now, again, this is going to be hopefully a short-term goal, but it's going to take some time. And so coming back after some of these action plans have been carried out and answering some questions on how did I do? Did I meet it? Did I not? And that, if there is a piece of the dialectical journal that you have, it's not looking at if a student achieved the goal. It's more of, what was my process? Did I overcome the challenges that I had identified? Did I stick to my timeline? So really the process can be looked at through this step 4 of reflection. So I just think the journal could be powerful for every step, but that real important step 3 of action planning. So that's one way that you can use journaling and drawing to achieve the goal setting health skill. Brad, thoughts?
I love how you combined the drawing and journaling together. That was a great example. And so now that Kim has done a great job of modeling one example of a practice opportunity, we would invite you to do the same thing. We would ask that you would find on your training guide standard selection part 1, and you select a standard that you would like to focus on. Could be goal setting. It could be a different step that Kim demonstrated, or you could choose your own standard and performance indicator. But once you do that, write that down on your training guide in the practice part 1 standard selection. And then you can move on to the next step, which would be part 2, practice. So now you're going to design and plan a learning activity or a practice opportunity using journaling or drawing, just like Kim did. And if you don't want to come up with a specific activity, you could also just kind of write down and think about and brainstorm how you want to implement journaling as a routine within your classroom. I think that could be useful during this period as well. Yeah. But right now, take the time to complete part 2, designing and planning, on your training guide.
Perfect.
And then we would close with our reflections. Kim, after hearing about journaling and drawing, I'm excited because teachers in Springfield, high school health teachers, are going to get the opportunity to journal, because we've been able to secure some journals for students. And I'm just excited because I think it gives us a great opportunity to drive our instructional planning. So I'm just envisioning, as a health educator, if I am reviewing and going through and learning more about my students, it's going to hopefully drive my instruction. So like you gave the sleep example. Well, if I'm noticing that 9 out of 10 of my students are struggling with sleep, then as an instructor, I'm going to slow down and spend a little bit more time and provide more skills and strategies about how to improve our sleep habits. Or during a goal setting, if I notice that 5 students all have a similar goal of weight management or whatever it may be, then maybe during an activity that gives me the knowledge of I'm going to pair these students together when working through that to help them set them up for success. And so I think it gives us a great opportunity to drive that instructional planning. We know that there's challenges involved. So what's a potential challenge that you see?
Yeah, I think you've hit on a couple. The time for the teacher to really implement some of the assessment practices that could go with that. But again, I think you have to be mindful about your process and your routines that you do set up. And you gave some great examples about rotating 5 students each day that you're going to really focus on. So I think time to I don't want to say grade, that's what I'm trying to say, to engage with students in the journal. I think that's an issue. And I think you'll also have some students that will say, I'm a terrible writer, so they won't choose the narrative. And then they're like, and I can't draw. And so they'll feel like a little defeated going in. And so I think you have to be prepared with maybe some anchor journals that say, well, here's how you can draw it. You don't have to draw like this elaborate sketch of your action plan. And you don't have to write a big narrative, but here, I think you need to have some very solid anchor journals to show kids that don't like to read or don't like to write, that are quite frankly poor at it. Some of your ELL students, I think that could be an issue. And so then maybe they don't know how to draw some of the things that we're talking about, because some of health content is tricky to try to draw. So giving some examples on how to use mapping, I think would be helpful, because that will be a challenge for some of your kids.
And one thing that I'm going to recommend to Springfield teachers is to model their own journal. So
your own.
I mean, I don't think we can expect young adults to share something personal about their health enhancing behaviors if we're not willing to share our own. So I think that can also be helpful.
Yeah.
So as you, the viewer, reflect on your own learning activity or your own implementation of journaling and drawing, capture that during the learning activities reflections section on your training guide, and complete question 1 and question 2. And question 2 would be related to the potential challenges that you foresee, and then try to brainstorm some ways to address and overcome that challenge. So that wraps us up for today. We wanted to mention our other series and our other videos available. If you have not watched the prompts video, it would be very helpful when deciding to implement journaling and drawing. And so we would encourage you to do that. You can access those on YouTube. And we just thank you so much for taking the time to view one of our skills-based health on-demand videos. Thank you again to Desi, Missouri Healthy Schools, MOSHAPE, and my awesome partner, Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Bye, everybody.